Echoes at Aurora, Part 1, by Joey Carlson. Northern Lights, 1959. A Minnesota mosquito stabbed the back of Harold Gunderson's neck and took in a long, instinctive slurp. Harold didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the blue, green, and pink colors pulsating in the night sky above, the Aurora Borealis. Harold unrolled a set of blueprints from his jacket, glanced at the dark shore, and said to himself, "This is where I'll build my legacy." The 26-year-old land developer's vision of the future crystallized in his mind. He would construct a grand lodge, beautiful cabins, docks, trails, and a state-of-the-art spa, all overlooking this postcard-perfect lake. The locals called it Lake Coon, an old Ojibwe name. But as Harold thought about it, he realized that name felt inadequate. It lacked the punch, the pizzazz, the marketability he craved. He needed something that resonated with the raw, vibrant energy of that night. Then it hit him. He would rename it Lake Aurora after the dancing lights he was privileged to witness. As soon as he renamed the lake in his head, he was surprised by a bone-chilling wind that swept across the lake. The wind was accompanied by a hiss that seemed to whisper, "It gifts as it slumbers, but soon will wake and roar." Harold tried to ignore the odd voice, packed up his truck, and told himself that he just needed to go home and catch up on sleep. The light show continued above his truck as he rumbled down a rural road. Before he got far, Harold saw a compact vehicle with a flat tire. In the driver's seat of the car sat a woman with flawless skin, blonde hair pulled in a tight ponytail, and a tear in her eye. The woman wiped the tear away as soon as she saw Harold. "I'm Eleanor," the woman said. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." Eleanor told Harold she was visiting friends in northern Minnesota and lived near him in Minneapolis. He offered to drive Eleanor home and promised to help her with the car the next day. As they sped through the flashing Minnesota night, the two bonded. Harold explained that he was a land developer and planned on building a splendid northern Minnesota resort. She opened up, sharing that she had a corporate job in Minneapolis where no one fully appreciated her. By the time Harold dropped Eleanor off at her apartment, the couple was naively in love. Harold tried to sleep that night but failed. Thoughts of Eleanor's beautiful face exploded in his mind. He also couldn't shake that damn voice and the phrase it repeated. "It gifts as it slumbers, but soon will wake and roar." Progress, 1961. The usual symphony of birds chirping at the renamed Aurora Lake was drowned out by the sounds of progress. Chainsaws, tractors, and pounding hammers. "Faster," Harold yelled. "We're losing daylight." In his personal life, 6 months of intense dating and courtship with Eleanor led to a joyous trip to the altar. Eleanor happily left her corporate gig and joined Harold in building Aurora Resort. But as trucks filled with timber carved scars into the earth, Eleanor had deep worries. Her expression was a mask of dread. "It's happening so fast," she murmured, her stomach churning. Harold gestured toward the lake. "It's progress, sweetie, progress towards our dream." He knew she had worries after the morbid discovery, the setback. He tried to dismiss it as a rational fear, but couldn't. You see, during excavation for the spa, a backhoe operator unearthed ancient bones and pottery, relics Harold preferred to ignore. Ojibwe warnings accompanied the findings. He hoped this spooky weirdness would simply become a spooky antidote for future campfire tales. News of the remains spread, bringing a group of Native American protesters, demanding construction cease. Harold offered donations. They refused. They clung to what he thought was an archaic belief that this site should remain untouched. He invoked eminent domain, pulled strings, and pushed through permits. Eventually, the bones were respectfully reburied at the property's edge. Out of sight, out of mind. "They're gone now, El," Harold said. "We can just move on." Eleanor stared at the wounded earth, a mix of sadness and fear in her eyes. "I talked to the chief, and he told me this is cursed land," she said. "He also said the reason I was getting sick was because we were disturbing the ancients. Harold snorted. That's just malarkey. Don't let them fill your head with nonsense. He turned to the idle backhoe driver. What are you waiting for? Dig that foundation. The driver hesitated, his eyes flicking to the spot where he'd unearthed the bones. He'd been jumpy, haunted ever since. Mr. Gunderson, he started, I don't feel right about this. Don't tell me you're buying those old ghost stories too, Harold snapped. It's just dirt. No more bones. Nothing to fear. He turned back to Eleanor, offering a loving smile. Don't worry, babe. We're building something special. Something that will make us rich, famous, happy. So many families will make memories here, including our family. Eleanor's gaze flicked to her stomach, imagining being pregnant, having a child and a family of her own. Suddenly, a familiar blast of wind shook Harold. He shivered, reminding himself of his grand dreams. No ancient stories, no creepy feelings, no ghosts, no premonitions could stop him. Success was his only destiny.
Spa Fever, 1968. Happy years at Aurora Resort flew by. Every season of success allowed for expansion and upgrades. More cabins, new toys, bigger boats, and the spa. The spa became legendary. The success even exceeded Harold Gunderson's lofty expectations. Guests flocked to escape city life, experience wholesome family fun, and take advantage of the miracles said to originate from the spa's magical waters. 7 years after opening, Harold stood on the veranda of the main lodge, a glass of red wine in his hand. He opened the local newspaper and was pleased to see another article about the resort. This article was a feature about the resort's crown jewel, the Aurora Spa. Tales of the spa's curative powers had spread like wildfire. People claimed it soothed aches, banished pain, and even eradicated diseases. This article featured a young woman with stage 4 brain cancer, and she was miraculously cured. The centerpiece of the spa was a naturally heated pool fed by a spring unearthed during construction. Many claimed that the water pulsed with a supernatural energy. Harold didn't really believe any of this healing hoopla, but he loved that these stories translated into profits. He marketed the spa as a sanctuary from the city. It was a place where your body could relax in the miracles of natural healing. He even hired an Ojibwa actor to pretend to be a medicine man and wellness guru. Harold had another sip of wine as he watched guests emerge from the spa entrance. One woman, bent over and limping from arthritis just a week ago, now exited the spa with a skip in her step. It's a miracle, Mr. Gunderson, the woman said. Harold tipped his glass in her direction and replied, Life's a miracle. Let's embrace it together. Eleanor joined him on the veranda, her gaze sweeping the grounds. It's incredible, she murmured. I hope people truly find solace here. Harold chuckled. Solace and a healthy bill. Eleanor's brow furrowed. But Harold, I'm worried. The staff. There are more reports. Bad dreams. Strange noises late at night. Especially near the basement levels. He sighed, weary of her fears. Elle, not those old tales again. They're not just tales. You moved the ancestors' bodies, Harold. There's pressure building. The girls cleaning the spa locker rooms hear whispers, and some even say now they need to take sleeping pills at night to drown out voices. Unease, despite his denial, gnawed at Harold too. Cold sweats, restless nights that he just blamed on stress. And then there was the one dream that Harold and Eleanor failed to realize together. They both wanted a child, but their inability to conceive added an unspoken layer of anxiety to every one of their conversations. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with either of them physically, and Harold often wondered whether it was something to do with the land that prevented him from creating a growing family. Silence stretched between them. Just as he pulled her close, a foreman from the spa's expansion hurried towards them, face pale. Mr. Gunderson, The men digging the new storage facility, they found something. Another opening. A cave. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, pierced him. What kind of cave? Don't know, sir, but the crew's spooked. They say strange stuff is growing down there. Molds, fungi, all glowing faintly. Looks unnatural. Harold drained his wine. He couldn't let this derail his empire. Seal it up, he commanded, his voice hard. Brick, concrete, whatever it takes, completely. And keep this quiet. Yes, sir, the foreman said as he hurried away. Harold closed his eyes, a silent prayer mixing with dread. Please let that be the end. Moments later, the whisper returned, clearer than it had been in years. It gifts as it slumbers, but soon will wake and roar. Family, 1970. In the grip of a frigid winter evening, Harold and Eleanor hosted their annual wild rice soup dinner. This wasn't just a meal. It was an important celebration for the resort family, the close-knit community of workers who lived rent-free in a small collection of cabins nestled a mile from the main resort. Harold and Eleanor continued to try, but failed to have children and a traditional family of their own. Doctors offered no solutions or explanations, and Harold couldn't shake a troubling observation. No one at his resort, it seemed, could conceive or even go into labor. Despite sadness and frustration, the couple still loved each other and loved their resort family. They shared meals with the workers, celebrated birthdays, and offered support to everyone who worked at the resort through life's ups and downs. Among the first to move into the resort family cabins was Mary Renat, an introverted but kind single housekeeper in her 20s. Mary, despite her reserved nature, attended every community gathering. However, when the 1970 wild rice soup dinner began, Mary was nowhere to be found. Her absence sent a ripple of alarm throughout the group. A frantic search ensued. Cabins were checked, the resort's grounds scoured, and every empty guest room investigated. Finally, a cook found Mary huddled beneath a pile of flannel blankets, her clothes torn, her body bruised, her eyes vacant. She remembered nothing. The horrifying truth, however, seemed to reveal itself weeks later when a pregnancy test came back positive. Mary swore she hadn't knowingly been with a man in years. Everyone, including Mary, assumed she'd been drugged and raped. 9 months after that fateful dinner, Mary's son, Elias, was born. He was a beautiful baby, and the entire resort family instantly fell under his spell, collectively becoming his adopted parents. Harold Gunderson felt a powerful connection to Elias, often seeing himself as the boy's primary father figure, a role that filled a void he hadn't realized was so vast. School, 1976. In the fall of 1976, Harold Gunderson and Mary Renat sat in the McGregor Public School principal office for the 4th time that month. This was the closest school to Lake Aurora and where Mary's son, Elias, attended 1st grade. I'm afraid, Miss Renat, Mr. Gunderson, that Elias continues to struggle. He's been involved in another fight. It's his 6th this month, the principal said. He doesn't come out of these fights unscathed either. Bruises, some blood, and this time, a broken nose. The community of resort workers were flabbergasted by the news of these violent outbursts. Elias had always been a kind and gentle boy. He often led children visiting the resort on frog catching and fishing expeditions. He had never been in a fight in his life until he left Aurora for school. The principal went over their options. We could send him to a boarding school, bring in a special tutor, or you could consider homeschool. Harold and Mary went back to Aurora and considered their options. After thought and consultation with the rest of the resort family, they agreed that homeschool was the best option. Over the next 4 years, Elias became an even more integral part of resort life. He learned alongside the chefs, helped the groundskeepers, knew returning guests by name, always ready with a helping hand. He seemed perfectly content. Yet, the few times he ventured off the property, incidents occurred. a shouting match at a town baseball game, a near drowning incident at a community picnic where witnesses swore he'd purposely held another child underwater before snapping out of a trance. To avoid these troubling episodes, Elias simply stayed put. He remained within the bounds of Lake Aurora, his sanctuary, his home, where he was always his happy, helpful, and trouble-free self.
Gift, 1980. That fall was unseasonably warm, and Harold found himself spending more time with Elias. The boy was now a teenager with a quiet strength that reminded Harold of himself, but with a gaze that held a depth Harold couldn't quite place. They fished together, walked the trails, and Harold taught Elias the intricacies of running the resort. He was the son Harold had always wanted, the legacy he had always planned. But the whispers in the basement grew louder, and the staff's unease became palpable anxiety. They spoke of creeping, almost sentient mold that pulsed with an eerie green light. The resort's profits began to dwindle as guests reported unsettling dreams and strange, almost aggressive wildlife encounters. One evening, as dust settled over the lake, Harold and Elias sat on the docks, their fishing lines a silver thread against the darkening water. "You've been quiet lately, Elias," Harold said, casting his line. "I've been thinking," Elias replied, his voice soft, "about the resort." Harold smiled. "Good. You'll be running this place one day." Elias turned to him, his eyes intense. "Is that what you want?" "It's all I've ever wanted," Harold said, his voice full of conviction. "A legacy, something to last forever." "But it's not yours to keep," Elias said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The land. It's alive, and it's angry." Harold felt the familiar chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about, son?" "The voices in the ground. They're getting louder. They're calling to me. They say they gave you a gift." "What gift?" Harold asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "Me, of course," Elias replied, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I'm the gift. They took all the life from the land and gave it to me so I could have life. All the warmth and health and happiness. It all came to me, to keep me alive. The healing waters, the lack of babies, the bad dreams. It's all so I could be born. I'm an echo of their anger, a curse wrapped in a gift." Harold was speechless. A bone-chilling wind swept across the lake, the kind he hadn't felt since that first night. The hissing whisper returned, only this time it was clearer, colder. "It gifts as it slumbers, but soon will wake and roar." Suddenly the wind changed direction, carrying a sickening scent of gasoline and smoke. The waves rose on the lake, and a plume of black smoke billowed from the direction of the main lodge. Elias's eyes widened, and he pointed to the lodge itself. "It's starting," he whispered. "My father, he's finally waking." Harold felt sick to his stomach. An enormous roar from the foundation of the spa erupted. The roar was not only a sound, but also a physical force. It shattered windows, tore at the roots of trees, and slammed the lake water with great, furious waves against the shoreline. Harold stood on the dock, a frantic energy coursing through him as he watched his legacy dissolve into ash and fire. There were sounds everywhere, crackling bushes, falling trees, screaming children, but Harold heard one thing above the rest: Eleanor's desperate cry for help. He didn't hesitate. He took off, running, a single-minded purpose driving him. He pushed through the panicked guests and staff, his eyes locked on the burning lodge. The heat was a physical wall, the smoke a choking blanket. He burst through the main doors, the air inside a furnace, the grand lobby already in shambles of crumbling walls and falling debris. "Eleanor!" he screamed, his voice raw. He found her, in the ballroom, cornered by a collapsing staircase. She saw him, and a look of relief washed over her face, quickly followed by one of pure terror. "Harold, no, I'm trapped for good. Get out!" He ignored her plea, his arms wrapping around her. He pulled her close, shielding her, as a great beam from the ceiling crashed down on the floor, cutting off their escape path. Both trapped, surrounded by fire, He looked into her eyes. No one had ever loved another human being as much as Harold loved Eleanor at that very moment. Harold looked out the window and saw Elias standing near the epicenter of the blaze, a strange, serene figure silhouetted against the fire. The flames licked at Elias's feet, but his clothes remained untouched, his skin unharmed. He was not a victim of the fire, but part of it. The land's gift had become its vessel. "I love you, El," Harold whispered, his voice trembling as he clutched his love. "I know," she said, burying her head against his chest. "We will always be together." The fire, now a towering inferno, surrounded them both. The air grew hotter, suffocating, and the hissing whisper returned, a cold finality on the wind. It gifted as it slumbered, but now wakes and roars. As the building burned to ash, the loving couple's cries were swallowed by the land's final, terrible roar. When the sun rose the next morning, all that was left of Aurora Resort was smoldering ash and ruin. The lake, however, was placid and serene, its surface reflecting the unblemished morning sky. There was no sign of Harold or Eleanor. Most of the hotel guests and staff had been burned to the bone, but at the very center of the charred remains stood a figure. It was Elias, the lone survivor of the Aurora Resort fire. He was unharmed, his clothes untouched, his face serene. He stared at the ground, a mix of sorrow and emptiness in his eyes. He was the legacy of Aurora, a human embodiment of its gift and its curse. As he walked into the lake's shallows, the placid water at his feet began to glow with a faint, green light. Elias knew that his father's land would have time to heal for many, many years. But he wasn't foolish enough to think that peace would last forever. It would take time, but eventually Elias would return to that same land and discover its true purpose. And when he returned, northern Minnesota would shake from the roar of his father once again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can find out what happens next to Elias and all the mysteries at Aurora Resort.